Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, it is the glass half full view of this upcoming season. Your reasons why the Milwaukee Bucks are the sleeping giant in the Eastern Conference. The podcast that looks at the positives comes your way next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen each and every day. You can find us on YouTube and free and available wherever it is you get your audio podcasts as well. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. It's the Positive Outlook episode, Camille, and this show is taking a look at the reasons for optimism surrounding the Bucks this upcoming season. I think we've gone over everything there is to go over here in the offseason, and there's certainly been differing viewpoints nationally and locally, even from the everydayers that we have here within the chats as well, over which side will you choose. It's kind of a choose your own adventure season for the Bucks. Do you view this as, hey, I understand the age component, all of it, which we'll get to in another episode, but I trust this group together. They still have not lost a series when their big three is healthy. Year two for Doc Rivers. Again, that's very polarizing in itself too. But this is a very unique season because I think it's relatively split on which side you fall on.
Yeah, and we're going to explore both of those sides, as you mentioned this week on Locked On Bucks. And I am somebody who, I think it was last week on Technical File, I was like, guys, talk me off of my optimistic ledge with the Bucks because I feel really good about this team. So I'm like, all three of you, tell me all of the reasons why this won't work, because I have.
Did
they tried. They tried. And I was still like, nope, still very, very high on what this team might be able to accomplish this season, in large part for the reasons that we're going to discuss here today. And I think you start with the fact that they have their head coach heading into the season, and they knew who that was going to be once last season ended for all those guys who are still on the roster today that were on the roster when the season ended. That is a big piece of this, especially given the way that this team kicked off training camp last year with that big Damian Lillard trade, lost Terry Stotts right away into training camp before the regular season even started. Then you lose Adrian Griffin, you bring in Doc Rivers. Like, it was just so many moving pieces last season. And I think this offseason of having a stability, of knowing who the coach is going to be, having the coaching staff set up for Doc, all of those things I think are going to be a real big positive for this team.
More importantly, as we mentioned, the name Doc Rivers is very polarizing.
Yes.
But there's no disputing he can handle the role. And that was the big unknown a season ago. This isn't to shovel dirt and pile on Adrian Griffin here, but that was the one thing you didn't know. As I think the questions were, okay, this guy has been up for a head coaching gig, 13, 14 times, 15 times that he was in contention in the interview process, never got it. Why didn't that happen? And I think very similar, that there was reasons to be optimistic and think, hey, they thought outside the box. I think this is a good hire. And there was other reasons that were red flags that were eventually proven to be true. That's gone with Doc Rivers. There is the playoff history. There's the 3-1 number in the playoffs that everybody's going to bring up. But just the day-to-day task of being a head coach, holding the clipboard, calling the plays, managing egos and players, that is not up for debate. Doc Rivers can handle that and has exhibited that throughout his career.
He has. And another thing that he's exhibited throughout his career is that he will play younger guys if they've shown that they are good. That's the narrative around Doc Rivers that I'm just like, listen, guys, if the young guys on the team are good, they will play. And you've seen that in previous stops of his. And I always think back to when he was coaching the Clippers and they were talking about the SGA trade. And he was, are we sure that we want to do this? Like, I think he's going to be.
You could also say revisionist history, but yes.
Right. Like, I think he's going to be one of the good. I mean, we saw it with Rondo. We saw it with a lot of different guys along the way.
Same thing with Tyrese Maxey, too.
Exactly. Like, if he sees the talent, he's going to lean into that. And I think even the fact that last year we saw AJ Green getting into the roster or into the lineups towards the end of the season there. You saw Andre Jackson Jr. Now, I know it didn't happen as quickly as people were hoping for last year with some of those guys getting minutes. But again, Doc was unfamiliar with their game, unfamiliar with what they could do. And as the season went on, he started putting them in the situation. So I do think, too, with this offseason, being able to work with those younger guys and having a summer league under his belt where he wasn't there directly, but his coaching staff was working with guys. They know what they're bringing to the table. It's going to be a big help as well, where it's not that unknown, like, well, I'm the coach of this team, but I have no idea what this guy on my roster can do.
It's not just for Doc too, it's essentially year one, as we've joked all throughout this calendar year. He got to audit the class, basically. Take what was essentially February through the end of the playoffs. He was the first to point out not many practice days. I think there was 3 total that he had, and was the first to also mention, look, I as you pointed to, not familiar with these young guys. So practice is the only chance I really get to see them, unless we have, garbage time. And even then, you're not pulling a lot from garbage time. And you have very limited reps of that. So it's not just the fact that we've seen him present at Summer League. I would assume he was probably in Greece over the weekend too, but he's been more connected to these guys. It's not just for Doc's benefit, though. Every single player on the team to know this is Doc Rivers. This is our coach. These are the things we got to know about Doc Rivers last year. These are the things that we knew prior to him becoming the Bucks head coach. There was none of that with Adrian Griffin. So that was the big unknown. That part's gone. But just the little things, too, that we saw, granted, it wasn't in the linear development you would have hoped to see a year ago, but we saw stages of, okay, the offense is starting to look better. Then it would take a step backward. Defense, same thing, especially the first, 15 or so games under Doc. The defense was great. Then it started to take a step backward. But these are all things that you get the sense, okay, now that he has that familiarity, now that these guys have that familiarity and there's more time, these things are going to look better. Most notably, what we're going to spend a lot of time on in the next segment. So I don't want to give away too much now, but that is the chemistry between Giannis, Damian Lillard, and not just that. From the onset, Doc Rivers, even before he was the coach of the Bucks, in his many appearances on other shows and podcasts, the Bill Simmons podcast, the approach of, look, Dame, you don't need to fit in. We need to fit in around you. And I don't think we really saw that last year. So it's one of the things we've talked about quite a bit, is that's the intrigue to me this year, is what Damian Lillard is going to look like.
Because, I mean, we've been talking about the continuity here with Doc Rivers, but to that point of what the next segment is even about, the continuity with the guys on this team, like, that was a big trade. And that was a big play style shakeup for the team as well, to go from Drew Holiday being your point guard to going to Damian Lillard being that guy. So really, Giannis and Dame getting used to playing with one another, 2 really ball dominant players getting used to playing with one another, learning how to use one another's gravity for more synergy, not necessarily of it being a my turn, your turn situation. So, like, when we're saying that we're also banking on continuity as a reason for optimism with this team, it's not just Doc Rivers and him being able to bring his coaching staff in, but it's also the guys on the roster having more time to develop their own personal chemistry, which should show up on the court a little bit better next year.
And those 2 guys, most notably Giannis and Damian Lillard, is this the year where it looks like what we thought it was going to be a year ago? So we'll get into that conversation coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by BetterHelp. And when we're younger, we have more time to learn things, new things that you'd like to take on in your life. Maybe it's new skills, traits, hobbies, any of that. Don't do quite as much of it when we're adults. Maybe it is just the hobbies that you gravitate towards: gardening, learning a new language, video games that you're taking on. But why not include self-improvement in there as well? Therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder, because your back to school era can come at any age. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. They're entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. To get started, all you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire. You'll get matched with a licensed therapist after you do so. You can even switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. We thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of the day. For your second listen, we encourage you to enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There is no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we do transition to those two big names, you mentioned something else too, which is important when we talk about the differences between this year and last year. Not only the uncertainty surrounding Adrian Griffin, but the full coaching staff. And especially after we saw the exit of Terry Stotts, that it was basically, okay, Joe Prunty has experience. There's some guys that have been with Adrian Griffin in Toronto, but that's about it. It is a total opposite this year. When you look at the veteran coaches that are there, Darvin Ham, a former head coach, Joe Prunty, a former interim head coach multiple times over. Greg Buckner was the associate head coach for the Cavaliers as well. So you add to that already Rex Kalamian and Dave Yeager, and Pete Dominguez too, who coached the Summer League, a much different feel to the coaching staff this season.
A much different one. And the thing with it as well is, one, Doc has a comfort with this coaching staff that he has here. I mean, when he came on board, he mentioned, I don't know a lot of these guys. So some might become friends and some might stay on, which we saw with a Prunty, for example. So there's that aspect of it too, but also for the players getting used to the coaches and understanding, like, okay, I'm sure there was probably a moment as well when Doc comes in of like, well, what's going to happen with this staff? Because I mean, when Doc came on, he remarked like, this is a really big coaching staff. And this year it's not much smaller, but that's neither here nor there. It's his guys this year. But just for the players to get that development as well and start the understanding of what role each of these coaches are going to play for their development going forward. And I loved him having that focus on player development. And we've talked about how the new CBA might make that so much more crucial for teams. So having the coaching staff together, comfort for Doc for sure, but also building relationships for the players as well. And having Darvin Ham come back, somebody who a lot of the current guys who have been here for a while, that core six guys, I would say, have big familiarity with them. Like, it's really nice to get him back in the town. And I mean, Bobby Portis mentioned it, I think last year or the year before, like we really miss having Darvin Ham like in this locker room.
Prunty, the Prunt dog, is he and Vin Baker, seemingly the two coaches that have fit that mold for Doc. Is, hey, sometimes you find new friends and they stick with you. That's it. And the Darvin Ham piece too. I know we were surprised, and we talked about it early in the offseason when that name kept coming up from Bucks fans of, hey, what about Darvin Ham and bringing him back? And both of us kind of diminished that and said, no, he's not going to go from head coach to assistant coach in one off season.
And if he did, we did not expect it to be in Milwaukee. You thought it would be with Bud in Phoenix. Yeah.
And he did. And that is also a testament and a credit to Doc Rivers, because that's a very awkward spot to be in, where you mentioned what Bobby Portis said about Darvin Ham. Other players have been very open about it too, their relationship with him, how much they missed him as the guy that they could relate to as a former player. And granted, Doc is a former player too, but he's built that bond and that connection with this group and won a championship with them. And I'm not going to say no coach does it, but it's an interesting spot to be in when you bring in somebody. And granted, I think Doc Rivers has more job security, but when you do that, you're almost looking over your shoulder of, okay, this is the guy that they already like.
Right.
If things go south, what does that mean for him? And he already has that experience. But Doc Rivers bringing him in and just really fortifying this coaching staff is another one of those pieces that ties to what we said about Doc Rivers and his continuity. The other big piece, and maybe this is the biggest piece, is the play of Giannis and Damian Lillard. And, you know, we talked about Giannis last year all season long, in a season full of ups and downs and inconsistencies and coaching changes and everything you could imagine, all the drama that had evaded Milwaukee for 6 years. Giannis was the constant. Damian Lillard was not bad. but Damian Lillard, I don't think, was what Bucks fans anticipated by the numbers. And Dame was the first to himself say that too.
Yep.
But we've seen quite a bit from Damian Lillard this offseason. And we continue to see the videos of him working out and who he's working out with. It almost seems as though, even though he put it out there of wasn't in the shape I needed to be in, he's heard the chatter and he's kind of taken it personally.
As he should. I'm glad to see it. Like that's the thing that I like to see. And that's what also gets me excited for this upcoming season, is seeing that the players are seeing what's been said, taking accountability in Dame's situation of like, yeah, I know how last year went. Trust me, I'm in the gym. I'm trying to make sure that last season does not happen again because I know that I have more to offer. And you love to see that. And I remember too, once the Bucks season ended prematurely this past year, Giannis was asking, he was like, what are your summer plans looking like? And he's like, when I get better, I'm guessing one of the first things I'm going to do is go to Portland to see Dame and spend that time with him. And not even just the on court, getting those fits together, which they have been working on. We've heard that coaches have been implementing things with them and saying like, hey, we want to use you in this way. So work on this summer. But he was even talking more about that personal side, getting that connection to help build their own personal chemistry. And we've heard all the past couple of days about the secret wedding in Greece for Giannis and Mariah getting married and who was there. And you're hearing rumors of like, oh, and Chris Middleton's best man. And it just goes again to show
which,
like,
by the way, Bobby Portis has said is not true.
I love Bobby coming like, hold on, y'all, hold on. No, like he might have been there, but this ain't it. But it's again just showing how close that these guys are and how important that is, because when you have that chemistry built up off the court where you like your brother and you feel like you're going to war with him, like when you get on the court, that translates as well. So I love that they are working on the off court and the on court part of the relationship. And I think it's going to be a big positive for the team, especially because we've had so many questions around how do Giannis and Dame and Chris all play off of each other and use each other, rather than it being like, hey, it's my turn, like you watch over here, and just understanding where they want the ball and that type of comfort that comes with playing with somebody for so long.
And I mean, this isn't to relitigate the trade. I feel like we've done that more than enough already. The difference is Drew Holiday is a plug and play player that he fits in anywhere. We saw it here in Milwaukee. You certainly saw it with Boston last year. That's been true everywhere that Drew Holiday has been. His skill set, his game, he is the ultimate type of player that you can drop in anywhere and there's going to be no disruptions. He fits with what you're trying to do. With Damian Lillard, in theory, you're adding a second Giannis. Right. So that was always going to be a challenge that I think a lot of us overlooked. Maybe you pointed out, how is this going to work? Is it going to be your turn, my turn? But we quickly just pushed it aside and assumed this was like NBA 2K. And of course, these guys are going to work and they're going to average 67 points a game combined.
And the pick and roll.
Right. And we didn't see it. I think a lot went into that. Again, all stuff that we've talked about all throughout this season, on the court and off the court. Coaching changes certainly didn't help. One of his comforts of Terry Stotts being gone, that didn't help either. But I think like last year, I think if you surveyed most Bucks fans, so I'll ask you, out of every 5 games, how many would you say were, that was the Damian Lillard experience? Like 2 out of 5, 1 out of 5, something like that?
Like 1 out of 5, 1.5 out of 5 or so, somewhere in that range.
If you can get 3, right? As long as you have Giannis and as long as you're healthy, if you get that number up to 3, I know there's been chatter of Dame's only got 1 good game a week in him that we've heard some voices say this past season. But look, you don't need Damian Lillard to be a 30-plus point per game scorer. He can be the supplemental guy next to Giannis. Now, I don't think you want him to slide that far down, but that's the point, is we've seen Dame putting in the work. He's talked about where he's at mentally and physically, and just his headspace being much different this season than it was a year ago for many obvious reasons. And it's not I'm not trying to say you don't want it, but it's not like you're asking Dame to score 30 points a night every single night. Just bump up that number where you get the amount of Dame games per week. And even something as small as that will have huge gains for this team.
It will. And I do wonder if with that, we see Giannis's numbers take a small step back. Because, I mean, if you look at what he did last year, a career year again for Giannis, even though he did not finish top 3 in MVP voting, which I believe was the first time since like the 21 season where he wasn't at least top 3 in the MVP count. But like when you look at his numbers, again, it was a year where he had the most double doubles of his career, the most triple doubles of his career in one particular season. And I do wonder if the gaudy numbers aren't there as much. Like he's not scoring, 32, 31 again. Maybe it's 27, 28, but you're seeing the assists tick up a bit. I believe last year he averaged like 6.5 assists, which if I remember correctly was like a career high for him. So maybe you keep seeing those numbers tick up. Maybe the rebounding ticks up a little bit more, even more for him. Cause I know he was top 5 or 6 in the league last year with rebounding. So maybe that's the give and take when it comes to what that Giannis and Dame partnership looks like next season, where it's like, maybe you do see more Dame 30-point games and Giannis a few less, but you're seeing the numbers on the stat sheet fill up in other places for these guys. And again, it goes game to game. Like I love when Dame was on, I think Club 520 or whatever Jeff Teague's podcast is called. And he mentioned a game where CJ McCollum was hot. He's like, I only had like 3 or 4 shots, but I just kept feeding him because I'm going to feed the hot guy, because when I'm hot, I'm going to want the ball too. So just that understanding of like, okay, every game might not be the same. I'm going to come out and prepare the same way, do what I need to do, with the understanding of whoever has the hot hand or whoever the defense is bending more towards, whatever the case may be, we're going to exploit that in this game and then look forward to the next one.
Bodes well for Chris Livingston if Dame's going to be feeding the hot hand this season. A few final thoughts on Giannis and those expectations, and then the makeup of this roster. And as we continue our view at why the Bucks are in a better spot right now than they were 12 months ago, we'll continue that conversation next on Locked On Bucks. Time to talk to you about our friends over at Game Time. You've heard Camille and I talk about them for a while now, as we both had those experiences getting tickets somewhere with and without Game Time, and the difference is immense. Game Time offers you the best in class for everything in your experience, for hunting down those tickets for whatever event it is you're looking to get into. Maybe it's a concert, a theater act, a game. If you're still doing those road trips to cross off baseball stadiums, we're approaching the time of year where you may be doing the same and crossing off NBA arenas. Game Time is your number one source for all of that. You can get a panoramic view from your seat within the app before you buy the tickets. Got Game Time's lowest price guarantee as well, where they will credit you 110% of the difference if you can find those seats cheaper elsewhere. And most importantly, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA, to get $20 off your first purchase on Game Time. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. So you mentioned Giannis, Camille, and that's the other piece is, when we talk about our team sleeping on the Bucks, it's really amplified with our people sleeping on the Bucks. It's amplified with Giannis too. Of all of a sudden, he slid down to he's on the borderline of being a top 5 player in the league, and this and that. And when the Bucks haven't gotten out of the first round, conveniently omitting the fact that Giannis didn't play in the first round last year, clearly wasn't healthy and didn't play in the entire first round the year prior to that. But it just seems like it's set up for everybody forgetting, oh yeah, this guy, this is what he looks like when he's in his peak. When you mention maybe his numbers take a bit of a step backward because Damian Lillard is more the player we envisioned, I do believe that's going to be the case. But I think the one thing that we really noticed from Giannis last year that I would imagine, best case scenario, everything we laid out happens, this thing is going to take another tick upward for Giannis, is the efficiency. All right. If Damian Lillard is doing what he's doing, if Chris Middleton looks anywhere near the guy that he was in that first round series against the Indiana Pacers, the other pieces that you've added, Gary Trent Jr., he fills the role and maybe exceeds in that role more so than we saw Malik Beasley of that 2 guard. All these things fall into place. it's going to make life so much easier for Giannis in terms of his efficiency, because now we really get to the crux of it, which we thought we'd have a year ago. Okay, who do you defend? Do you stick with Dame? Do you cover Giannis rolling to the hole? We didn't really see that last year. And if all this is clicking and Doc Rivers has diagrammed this offense and had the time to get in the lab and work with these guys, this is the year you get the chance, or you get the sense we're going to see that.
Absolutely, because I mean, we've talked about it before, and I forget which player mentioned it, but under Adrian Griffin, again, not to pile on what Griff did, but it was mentioned that the guys were like, a lot of this was just us playing on talent, like us just kind of figuring things out, not that they were being schemed into place to be such an efficient offense, so on and so forth. So, to your point about how can we unlock these guys and scheme up even better? Like, I'm excited to see what that looks like for this team with Doc Rivers at the helm, but also the roster itself. We've mentioned it before, but I feel like the roster just makes even more sense this year than it did last year. And all of the free agent additions that the team brought in with Taurean Prince, with DeLon Wright, with Gary Trent Jr. Like, all of these pieces are technically, in my opinion, upgrades over some of the guys who they're looking to replace. You got the Prince for Jay Crowder. And again, I know everybody looks back now and it's like, man, 5 draft picks or 5 seconds for Jay Crowder. Like, yeah. And it's like, for sure. But the idea behind Jay Crowder was that he was going to be a versatile defender for the team, be able to knock down threes. And it just didn't come to pass. And when you look at Prince, it's like, this is what he is supposed to be able to do. And we saw him do it at a better rate last season than we saw Jay Crowder do. So again, look at that as an upgrade. Look at DeLon Wright coming in and having that on-ball defender for the team, which the Bucks didn't really have until they got Pat Bev, late on into the season. So that's an upgrade in itself because of the age with DeLon Wright. Pat Bev wasn't the same Pat Bev we saw before, but he did bring something this team needed, which was that point of attack defender and that edge. The edge piece of it for Wright, probably not the same as Pat Bev, but the on-court play should be there. And then Gary Trent Jr., as we've mentioned before, that signing alone, in both of our opinions, took the Bucks offseason to a different level, where you're able to replace your starting shooting guard of Malik Beasley with Gary Trent Jr., someone who shares a lot of the same characteristics, but has a better defensive upside than what Malik Beasley was able to provide. So, like, you look at that, pair that along with Giannis, with Dame, with Chris, with Brooke, with Bobby, it all just seems to make a little bit more sense. And then you have the young guys on the roster as well who are going to be pushing for playing time. So, like, there are just so many options for this team. Now, the season will reveal if they're good options for the team. But at this point in the season, looking at it on paper, it just looks like an upgrade over what we had last year.
I think it's a pretty clear upgrade. We're not saying, well, they got elite additions, but yeah. I don't think it's disputable that Gary Trent Jr. is an upgrade over Malik Beasley. The one area where you would say, well, it's up for debate is the shooting. Malik Beasley is a better shooter than Gary Trent Jr. Gary Trent Jr. does everything else at a higher rate than Malik Beasley does. And I've heard some Raptors fans and some others that I've talked to said, well, I don't know about the offense. Like, he's not as good of a shooter as Malik Beasley. And there's some parts of it where you think, okay, this is a little too much, Gary. My pushback is just, look, I don't know if you watched Bucks games last year, but anytime Malik Beasley did anything other than catch and shoot the ball on offense, it was an adventure at the very least. As you mentioned, Taurean Prince, a lot of pushback from Lakers fans too. Be careful what you wish for. There's no denying he is a better player right now than Jay Crowder is. Does that mean he's a guy that you can really rely on as a 16 player and in those key spots in the playoffs? Who knows? Remains to be seen. But for the regular season, this is far and away a better roster than it was a season ago. With those additions, DeLon Wright is another one that is a perfect fit for this team. And I think the big piece of it too is we spent a lot of time talking about how old this group is. DeLon Wright's 32 years old. That was the oldest addition that they made in the offseason. Everything else was younger than that. 30 years old for Taurean Prince. Gary Trent Jr. isn't even 30 years old. So they're starting to move the needle in the right direction in that sense. And the other big piece is, what's the development that you see from those young guys? Because while the team results weren't what you were looking for last year, we're probably going to look back at it and say, okay, the best thing to come from last year, I mean, this is debatable. Maybe it's finding your true coach, actually. But secondly, getting those minutes and getting more reps and experience for AJ Green and certainly Andre Jackson Jr.
Yeah, absolutely. AJ Green is one of the guys who I'm really looking forward to seeing this upcoming season since we didn't see him in summer league. But he was somebody, as I mentioned earlier on, found his way into the rotation and even got some playoff minutes. And I do think his playoff performance was underwhelming this year. But like his first real taste of it, I'm looking forward to seeing how he grows from it. And the age thing is so interesting because AJ Green's 24 years old. He turns 25, I think, in a couple of months. And Gary Trent Jr. turned 25 at the beginning of this year. So, like, they'll both be 25 come end of the year. And I was just like, that is crazy to think about. But those young guys on the roster, we've seen the potential, and there's things about each of them that has fans like wanting to see more. From the defense with Andre Jackson Jr. and the energy that he brings there, the glimmers of playmaking that he might be able to provide, to the shooting touch of AJ Green, to Chris Livingston, your guy. You run the Chris Livingston fan club, but again, I can see why. The frame, the ability to do all the little things like we saw in summer league, and then just hearing from the team itself saying like he's had a really good summer, and we're looking forward to seeing what he brings. I feel like it's a really good mix of guys on this particular team, and I'm really looking forward to seeing which guys win that playing time going forward in the season and how that changes over the season as well.
Co-chairs of the Chris Livingston fan club with our friend Ty as well. And I think I recruited Josh Lloyd as well when we were doing our fantasy preview for the Bucks this upcoming season. But that is the defenses case that we just laid out here. The reasons for optimism. If you missed it, we also laid out the prosecution case. And look, it's over, guys. The window has closed. Here's the reasons to not find that optimism. So leave your thoughts in the comments. The over-under for the Bucks is what, 49.5, I believe. So. Leave your thoughts. Which side do you fall on? Is there reasons to be optimistic? Do you buy into that? And do you think the Bucks are going to exceed that win total? Or maybe you prefer the other episode that we released today as well. But that will do it for today's show. We've got a lot coming up this week yet to make up for some lost time. We have our win totals draft with Frank Madden, our tiers discussion as well. And at some point in the coming days, we have some NBA 2K related content coming your way. If you missed it, the other side of the coin, as I mentioned, is out there as well. We released them together, your reasons for optimism, the other episode, the reasons to be pessimistic for the Bucks. So check that one out as well. That'll do it for today's show, though. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.